On the eve of the Nevada caucuses, when a left-wing demonstrator interrupted a rally in Las Vegas, Trump told a cheering crowd, "I'd like to punch him in the face."
He's a dog. He's a pig. He talks how he wants to punch people in the face. Well, I'd like to punch him in the face.
By the spring of 2016, the anti-Trump forces started fighting back. Much of the pushback came in California. They started fighting back for the 3 people who got punched, and that explains clubbing people over the head with bike locks and beating up girls, and that justifies beating up little girls and calling Indian women Nazis and making them walk in the dirt. Little old ladies. Chasing around little old ladies. How many times has Antifa chased around little old ladies? Oh my god. Enemies of freedom. Much of the pushback came in California. On April 26, left-wing protesters scuffled with the right at a city council meeting in Anaheim. A few days later, leftists tossed eggs at Trump supporters in San Jose. Are you sure that's all that happened? You sure? Just eggs. And then on June 26th, the Traditionalist Workers' Party, a neo-Nazi group from Indiana, held a march in Sacramento with the Golden State Skinheads. Its stated purpose was to take a stand against the anti-Trump protests, or what the rally's planners called the orchestrated pogroms by Zionist-agitated colored people. A group called ANTIFA Sacramento organized a countermarch, arranging carpools for its members, readying medics for the injured, and setting up a bail fund for those who got arrested. The neo-Nazis' permit allowed them to march in a park outside the domed state capitol at noon. The two sides clashed almost the moment they arrived. There were plenty of hints ahead of time that the Sunday rally would not go peacefully. A similar brawl occurred in February and now at a rally in Anaheim. Anti-fascist groups clashed with Ku Klux Klan members and left at least 3 people stabbed. Experts who monitor such groups say violence involving both sides is nothing new. Don't they know you're not allowed to say it's both sides? Both sides signal in advance of Sunday's riot that they are bracing for confrontation. The Antifa, a coalition of groups opposed to the neo-Nazi movement, issued a call on the web for protesters to show up and smash fascism.
It's Yvette Falarco, and I'm a national organizer with BAM, which stands for By Any Means Necessary. Our whole name is the Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action, Integration, and Immigrant Rights, and fight for equality by any means necessary.
Obviously, you have some blood on your head. Is this how it was planned? Is this what you expected? Or what was the plan? What was the goal today?
The goal today was to shut down the Nazis' recruitment rally, and I want to congratulate everyone who came out today because we succeeded in doing that. We defeated them in their efforts. They had to run running from hiding behind the police and then just running away altogether. They were not able to hold any kind of demonstration on the West Steps or any steps of the Capitol, and that was absolutely because of the militant, integrated, direct action of the people who came out. BAM mobilized to get people out here to shut them down, and we're really, really glad that there's been such an integrated, direct action struggle by people who came out to succeed in doing that. To us, there's no free speech for fascists. They do not have the right to organize for genocide, and we were organizing to tell people, to one, let the fascists know, anyone who's thinking about joining them, don't, because it's not going to be a good day for you. People have different ways that they approached the struggle. Our method is to build a mass, militant, integrated, anti-racist and immigrant rights movement, and to do that and getting as many people as possible to take militant mass direct action. And so, but everyone who came here today came here united with one goal, and that's to shut down the Nazi scum, and we did that. But today, they looked as weak as they are. They had to run hiding, and we want to make sure that happens, and we're committed to making sure that if they try to show their faces publicly again and hold any other rally, whether it's in Sacramento, whether it's any other place in California or nationally, BAM is building and leading a movement that's committed to building militant, integrated, direct action to shut them down by any means necessary. This was a very widespread mobilization. People came from all over California, in fact, some places outside of California. And, but that's what it takes. That's what building a mass militant movement takes.
And I saw you from the get-go, not afraid to get down there. The first man who appeared that you guys all attacked over there, and then, every time it seemed like there was a sign of anyone who may have been a Nazi, the crowds would just run, and that was all part of the plan.
Well, it's important for anyone who's thinking about joining racist genocide and a racist genocide organization like the Nazi groups that were holding this, that they're not welcome. And if they trip and fall in the process of that, good.
And I've seen you fighting, I've seen you leading the chants, I see you getting teary-eyed talking about this. It seems like this was a whirlwind of emotions for you.
And we would do it again. And I am really, really glad that we did that. I would do it again, and we urge other people to join us next time. Clearly, they are dangerous, and we need to keep building this movement. And we've got to build it as an independent political movement. BAM has no interest in, sowing any illusions in the Democrats, obviously not the Republicans. This is about building a militant, integrated movement that's independent, organizes masses of people, and takes militant direct action to stop it.
One arrived legally, one was there legally, and the other wasn't. And according to some reports, the police basically allowed the Antifa through and then locked them in together and then did nothing. I believe that was a legal observer, a lawyer or something who made that testimony in one of the Sacramento local papers. Within minutes, one Antifa fighter was stabbed. There were fistfights, stick attacks, and 6 more knifings. Personally, I've always wondered whether nonviolence was a better means, says one anti-fascist, a friend of Clanton's who gave her name as Lou. But Sacramento, Lou explains, cemented for me that these people are willing to use violent measures. When you attack them, you have to, don't you? You have to defend yourself when a group clad in black shows up with weapons and starts attacking you. What do you think is going to happen? They have no moral restraint in inflicting harm, whether through their ideology or their actions, and we need to do everything we can to stop them and silence them. She adds, these are punchable people. These are people who should be punched. So they've obtained a legal permit to speak their mind, and you want to silence them, you want to punch them. And then when they start defending themselves, you cry out in pain as you hit them. Clanton won't say whether he was in Sacramento that day. That's interesting. But he does admit that the violence there radicalized him further. Antifa, he tells me, had been watching the right expand for months, but Sacramento was the first time that weapons had been used as the two sides came to blows. That's a moment in which things escalate, he says. It's like an oh shit moment in which things start to seem really serious. Fuck you, man. Whenever you're attacking somebody, as far as I'm concerned, it's a matter of life and death. When you can knock somebody out, frickin' they blow their head on the pavement, you start stomping on it, there's a mob of you guys around, you all got frickin' weapon, you club somebody over the head with a goddamn lethal weapon, Clanton. If things seem really serious, you're the guy making them that way. Trump's inauguration was another shortly after 10 a.m. as the president-elect was preparing to take his oath of office at the Capitol. A crowd of several hundred black-clad anti-fascists formed 2 miles away at Logan Circle. Over the next half hour, the Antifa column traveled 16 blocks, the authorities say. Its members smashing windows at a gas station, a Starbucks. I told you they hated the fucking Starbucks. A bank and a Bobby Van steakhouse. After the police arrested dozens, journalists... Is a Bobby Van steakhouse like a local place? That would be... I guess it's a franchise, they're speaking of it that way, but... Cars are also white supremacy. After the police arrested dozens, journalists and legal observers among them, well, see, it's fascism. Splinter groups veered off to commit more mayhem. They set fire to a limousine, and one Antifa marcher, who remains unidentified, slugged the neo-Nazi Richard Spencer in the face. It was the largest black bloc I'd ever seen in the US, said one man who took part. It was actually sort of shocking. During Trump's transition, the extreme far right had a public coming out. 2 weeks after the election, Spencer threw a victory party a few blocks from the White House shouting, "Hail Trump, hail our people," to a room full of supporters making Nazi salutes. On Inauguration weekend, a roster of conservative luminaries, including the alt-right tweeter Mike Cernovich and James O'Keefe, the dirty trickster activist, well, that's the pot calling the kettle a nigger, appeared at a triumphant DC gala known as the Deplorable. Around the same time, Matthew Heimbach, the founder of the neo-Nazi group that fought in Sacramento, lunched with Republican operatives at the Capitol Hill Club. Milo Yiannopoulos was meanwhile traveling the country, triggering college students on the finale of what he called his Dangerous Faggot Tour, and a calculated and lavishly funded assault against the left, the incendiary roadshow of Islam bashing and misogyny was partly underwritten by the billionaire Mercer family, which had also supported Stephen Bannon in his roles as both the chairman of Breitbart News and as one of Trump's chief White House counselors. Anxiously watching as all of this unfolded, the Antifa website, itsgoingdown.org, published a report in January claiming that these various activities were evidence of a growing far right which is attempting to leave the confines of the internet and enter into the streets in the wake of Trump taking power. He will not divide us. The move offline had already had consequences. He will not divide us is a perfect example of non-violent protest, you fucker.
I love Italian disco.
It's awesome. Oh my god.
Some Italian disco.
It's called, I don't know, it's called Chatelet.
Chatelet.
Chatelet? Yeah.
Chatelet.
Pretty cool. That sounds good already. Yeah. Let's speak.
We will make America great again.
No, it doesn't. Come on, let's dance.
You will not divide us, you will unite us. You will come inside 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 us. So far, boys and girls. The night has just begun.
Is that a little speaker? Whose speaker is that? Oh shit. Somebody's speaker, huh?
He will not divide us. 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 He will not divide us.
To us, you are nothing but Trump.
did nothing wrong. Hey! You will not divide us. You will not divide us. You will not divide us. You will not divide us.
He will not divide us. He will not divide us. He will not divide us. He will not divide us. He will not divide us. He will not shut the fuck up. 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 They will not divide us.
Now, the only violence came from Shia LaBeouf when he punched his own supporter because he was triggered. The move offline had already had consequences. On Inauguration Day, an IWW union worker was shot at one of Yiannopoulos' speech in Seattle. That was a weird one. I think that was like somewhat premeditated. And the people who did it, I think, were Trump supporters or Milo kind of... I don't know if they were Milo supporters. They were anti-leftist, but they were minorities, I believe. This is a weird thing. It was like a husband and wife. They kind of worked together on it. 5 days later, fights erupted when Yiannopoulos appeared in Boulder, Colorado. Now he was scheduled to speak at Berkeley, where he planned to announce a new initiative that dovetailed with the president's agenda, an effort to abolish sanctuary campuses that harbored illegal immigrants at taxpayers' expense. For all these reasons and more, It's Going Down wrote, several thousand people are expected to come out to UC Berkeley in the hopes of shutting down Milo's event. On February 1st, before Yiannopoulos arrived, more than 1,000 protesters gathered in the dark at Sproul Plaza in the heart of Berkeley's campus. A small detachment of Antifa activists moved among them. When anti-fascists started throwing rocks at the police, protests spiraled into a riot. Windows were smashed, barricades were trampled. People hurled fireworks, gas-powered spotlights erupted into flames all on their own. All told, the vandalism cost more than $100,000 in damage. Yeah, and when they canceled it, what they did was they made all the attendees walk through the violent crowd. The police were in the campus, on the campus grounds, and they made the attendees leave through the violent mob who was armed to the fucking teeth. Jake Shields, the UFC fighter Jake Shields, ended up taking out a couple of guys who were armed and beating up somebody. There was a dude wearing an bulletproof vest who got his ribs broke with a pipe. Another guy knocked out unconscious. I've never found out what happened to him. There was dudes in their dorms being beaten. I mean, it's just insane. I don't think there's ever been a real tally of the injuries on that day. I mean, $100,000 in damage had to be the medical bills. Just the medical bills alone. The campus riot was a signal event escalating the antagonism between the anti-fascists and their right-wing rivals, and shaping the contours not only for the battles that would soon be fought in Berkeley, but also for those that would take place later in cities like New Orleans, Portland, Oregon, and ultimately Charlottesville. Aren't they going to be surprised when the details of Charlottesville come into the public news? Like they just suppress this stuff for as long as possible, and then it fucking bursts. Like when people find out there were mitigating factors, and you know the judge, if the judge takes those into account, and there's a reduced sentence or some sort of he gets off on a technicality because he had a rifle pointed at him moments before he drove into the crowd, completely changes the context. I mean, all the Clantons of the world, it's going to set them the fuck off, isn't it? While many on the right may not have felt much affinity with Yiannopoulos, a large number could detect a common enemy in the black-clad youths who had seemingly defiled the First Amendment by chasing him from one of the country's premier universities. In the wake of the riot, critics on the left also had qualms about the cancelled speech, but wielding free speech rhetoric as a cudgel, the right, especially in Northern California, began to organize around it. Leaders emerged who couched the conflict with Antifa as a patriotic defense of liberty, a gambit that attracted to the fray many conservatives who had until then been silent. Some of these conservative recruits were not just eager to oppose their new enemy, but to physically confront it. They went into their basements, grabbing pipes and 2x4s and readying an ersatz armor of football pads, plywood shields, and motorcycle helmets. As rallies were announced that spring, a right-wing fighting class was born. The first time this militia took the field was at March for Trump, a free speech protest held in Berkeley, and a dozen other cities on Saturday, March 4th. Well, that's some organization, isn't it? You get a dozen different groups organized at once. In advance of the event, the first to occur in Civic Center Park, Kathy Zhu, one of its local organizers, well, that's a white supremacist name, isn't it? Tweeted, "If you want to defend your liberty and your rights, then march with us on Berkeley." Antifa had closely tracked the gathering, and a company of its activists was planning, as one of its communiques said, on confronting fascists in the streets. What resulted was a multi-hour rumble of fistfight stompings, pepper spray attacks, and wrestling matches. Clanton was in the park that day, unmasked, he says, as an observer. What happened on the ground on March 4th actually seemed like more of a shit show, he recalls. Fights just broke out, and it was very confusing who was who, and people were just getting hit all over the place. That's another thing, these guys. I've got so many examples of them beating up their own people. San Jose, they beat up one of their own guys. There was another one, Berkeley, I think, where somebody dropped their phone and they started just smashing their phone, and it was his actual buddies right next to him was trying to tell him to stop, and he wouldn't stop. There was the guy with all the earrings and hoops and stuff, and they punched him, made a big hole in his face. I'm pretty sure I see. Yeah, there was the route at Berkeley from the smoke. There was a guy running, and they clubbed him in the head with a skateboard. Their own guy, because he got unmasked. They couldn't recognize him without a mask on. I've seen this on other occasions. I don't know if it's fear or if they're just so freaking violent that they'll lash out at the closest person. Like, I guess they are, because if the white supremacists don't turn up somewhere, then they fight the cops or they fight whoever's there. I mean, if the Yiannopolis protest served as a wake-up to the right, March for Trump had a similar effect on Antifa. So how can you call what happened at Berkeley a protest? There's nothing that was a protest about Berkeley. That was a mob attack. There was signs saying, this is war. I mean, come on, this isn't a protest. There's fucking Molotovs and shit. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What disturbed the movement most was that under the rubric of defying the left, the right was starting to bring together its disparate factions. A coalition was emerging, its going down route of libertarians, ANCAPs, armed militias, brown shirt alt-right reinforcers, the patriotic Tea Party crowd, and alt-light deplorables, without alienating any of them. Even Berkeley's college Republicans were now involved. Oh, okay, so that's why they attacked the little girls. And the hardcore neo-Nazis would soon join them on the front line. So the hardcore neo-Nazis didn't even get there yet. The energy began before Trump, but there's no question that the deplorable subculture that developed around him and the free speech rallies that were something new and different, said James Anderson, the editor at It's Going Down. It looked very scary, like the far right could do whatever it wanted and get away with it. Is that what Berkeley looked like to you? Like, you guys showed up, you attacked them. Did anybody even get arrested out of that? You know, and you think the message from that was that the right could do what they wanted. That was people's mindset then, like, holy shit, this is the new normal. Yeah, well, I think that quote's accurate on both sides. Anderson admits that there was concern in Antifa circles that the free speech rallies were a trap of sorts, designed to provoke the anti-fascists and expose them to public censure and police reprisals. But when a new group on the right, Liberty Revival Alliance, took to YouTube in April, announcing that it would hold another free speech rally in Civic Center Park, the anti-fascists decided to respond. The Patriots' Day protest was going to feature a list of celebrity speakers, among them Kyle Chapman, a commercial driver from San Mateo, who had swung his stick with such ferocity at March for Trump that he was christened with the nom de guerre Base Stickman. In the run-up to the rally, Chapman went on a publicity tour that included an interview with Gavin McInnes, a co-founder of Vice and a leader of the Proud Boys, a cult-like fight club of young Western chauvinists. People are totally inspired by you, McInnes told Chapman. We're pushing back the Antifa and the liberals and the nutbars and the commies and the Marxists. I think that calling these people anarchists or Antifa isn't good, Chapman answered, in his bright red USA cap. I think we're starting to call them what they are. These are domestic terrorists. As Patriots' Day approached, the stakes kept getting higher. First, the Oath Keepers, a gun-toting nationalist militia, agreed to provide security, calling on 3%ers, military veterans, patriot police officers, bikers, and all other brave American patriots to help protect the rally against radical leftists who use violence to shut down and silence free speech. When several neo-Nazi groups, among them Rise Above and Identity Europa, announced that they were also going, Antifa sounded the alarm. Calls to defend the Bay were issued from It's Going Down and Northern California Anti-Racist Action, a regional Antifa collective. On Facebook and Twitter and through real-world social networks, friends spread the word to friends and friends of friends to fetch their balaclavas and head toward Berkeley again. On the advice of his lawyer, Clanton won't talk about Patriots' Day, but it's clear that he considers that the event and the fighting there that led to his arrest as a kind of last straw. Funny how when you get arrested, that's the last straw. Arrested for what I'm, as far as I consider, it's an attempted frickin' murder. You can put a guy's bone, it's at least an assault with a deadly weapon. I think that's probably a bit more accurate, but you could argue that charge. I mean, I think you could certainly find enough statements from him to prove intent to murder, definitely. The Bay Area was the liberal bastion where he had found his place in the world after fleeing Bakersfield. He's a refugee. For months, he had watched in outrage as the right showed up like insurgents in the Bay, ranting about feminists and illegal immigrants, not in coded dog whistles, but openly and proudly in public places. How fucking dare they speak their fucking mind on political issues? I found that personally fucking offensive, Clanton says, because the Bay Area is my home, and it's hard not to take it personally when people come into your home and say these things, praising Pinochet, wanting to throw leftists out of helicopters, talking about the supremacy of whiteness, talking about what amounts to rape culture. That is offensive. It's infuriating. And it's infuriating because it praises and legitimizes violence against my friends, my neighbors, and me. You know what's worse than legitimizing violence? Committing it. You know what legitimizes violence? Committing it. I think self-defense is probably the most fundamental human right there is. After Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and the Sacramento Nazis. After Donald Trump, Richard Spencer, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Kyle Chapman, it seems Clanton had finally had enough. After Eric Clanton, a lot of people had enough. Which may be why when the Berkeley police searched his house on the day of his arrest. Among other things they found was a U-shaped metal bike lock. You know, if you guys just called him out as a terrorist, if you completely denounced him, if you could diffuse so much of this. I mean, if he was the one at Berkeley initiating, you know, at least a significant portion of the violence, and he's been there this whole time, I mean, you can prosecute him and use him as your scapegoat, and maybe we can get some peace out of this. But instead, you're gonna defend him, you're gonna excuse him, you're gonna promote his cause, and the shit's gonna keep going. You know, preemptive strikes weren't good when George Bush did them. We got mired down in a war that doesn't end. There's no way to end this war either. The Alameda County Courthouse sits just east of downtown Oakland, across from a jogging path that curves around the shores of Lake Merritt. It was built in 1934 and once held the office of District Attorney Earl Warren before he served on the Supreme Court. Made of granite with a terracotta trim, the structure is blocky and imposing in a California Gothic style, like something out of Chinatown. Last May, Clanton was there for his arraignment. The hearing was procedural, but afterwards there was drama in the hallway. Clanton's lawyer, Dan Siegel, took questions from reporters, and among the scrum was a video crew from the alt-right outfit, theredelephants.com. If your client goes to jail, will be this... If your client goes to jail, will this be the first time he moves out of his parents' house? One of the elephants asked. A few moments later, the same man shouted, an ethics professor decided to attempt murder on people. What kind of ethics is that? On the last day of my trip to California, I have covfefe with Clanton and Lou, his Antifa comrade. It's Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after Charlottesville, and Berkeley is again on high alert. Yet another right-wing protest, this one billed as No to Marxism in America, is underway in Civic Center Park. As we sit in a cafe in Oakland, what's wrong with just letting these people fucking go do an anti-Marxism march in Oakland? That's your home, your communist home that you own in this land that's nobody's, especially not white people's. As we sit in a cafe in Oakland, I watch the news, which does not feel new, unfold on Twitter. An Antifa mob is breaking through police lines. Its fighters are swarming their outnumbered opponents. Now they're pepper spraying people. Now they're chasing them away with flying fists. Learning of the scuffle, Clanton shares a look with Lou. They hope aloud that everyone's okay. Earlier that morning, both had attended a breakfast at an Antifa communal space where their colleagues were preparing for the conflict. Because of his court case, Clanton isn't going to the protest, but it's clearly on his mind. Perched on a patio chair, smoking American spirits, he says, just about all of my thoughts are up in Berkeley. Never mind that when he got let out on bail, he almost immediately violated his parole conditions and attended a protest. But I think attending an Antifa communal breakfast to plan for a protest, does that not count? Is that not an incitement or leading or a association? Why was he not banned from associating with what essentially, has been recognized as a terrorist group? They have gang laws in California. I know they have gang laws that ban you from associating with certain gangs.
Why would you say that?
Unless those have been recently swept from the list, like every other reasonable law. What's the newest one? 6 months, you can get 6 months in jail for handing out a straw without being asked. You can now also get 6 months for knowingly passing HIV to another person. It's the exact same sentence, or a fine, and it's the exact same fine, a straw, and HIV. We had spent much of the weekend going back and forth about using non-violence to confront the right. Clanton had been adamant. Showing up unarmed and unprepared to protest people who were willing to hurt others was simply too risky. Well, while peaceful demonstrations might serve to dispel Antifa's critics, Clanton says he isn't interested in giving up his safety or that of his friends to seize the moral high ground, which he dismisses as a notion created by the narrative class. Morals are white supremacy. Nor does he put much stock in the right's high-minded assertion that it's fighting for free speech. Was Yiannopoulos coming to Berkeley defensible in terms of free speech? It's an open question, he says. But what is not defensible is outing undocumented students in a way that, if not directly advocating, suggests or sort of incites violence against them. Great sentence there, Clanton. Lou is more direct. Free speech is being used to cover for a very violent message. What they're trying to protect is hate speech and calls for genocide.
You don't know where I've been, Lou. Oh my God! You don't know where I've been! Lou, please let us keep it low!
Whether what we're seeing now is fascism or not, it would not be hard to argue that Donald Trump has already accomplished more than any recent president to imperil both day-to-day welfare of the country's most vulnerable residents and the various democratic norms that have long protected even the powerful from authoritarian rule. Typically, it's not the powerful that need protection from authoritarian rule, is it? At the same time, he has reanimated a class of extremists, some of whose explicit goals are to rid the nation of its non-white races. And on the other side, it's to get rid of borders and to get rid of the white races. Sitting with our coffees, Lou says, the inherent truth to fighting fascism is that we just want people to be good to each other, and fascists aren't good to each other. Despite that being the definition of fascism. The only way to end the fascist menace, she adds, is by smashing it immediately. As the Twitter reports keep rolling in, tear gas has now been fired. I asked Clanton if he thinks there is any meaningful distinction between a white supremacist like Richard Spencer and a Trump supporter who wants to build the wall. After one of his academic pauses, he acknowledges the two are not the same. The real difference, he suggests, is who is wielding bats and sticks and shields and knives and who is not. Antifa. But does he apply those parameters to the unarmed right-wing marcher who was set upon just 30 minutes earlier in Berkeley and kicked by Antifa protesters as he lay on the ground? Well, finally, we're at the end of the article and we get the opposing side from the Rolling Stone. Clanton's moral certainty, his deep conviction that the fascist threat is real and needs to be snuffed out, even at the cost of his liberty or scruples, makes me think of a letter he wrote to his loved ones while he was being hunted by the cops last year, addressed to the broken hearts. It seems to make reference to the Patriots' Day, but was apparently never sent. It will be a very long time before anyone who isn't part of this fight will come to any understanding of the fucked up events of that day, he wrote. The world is much stranger and more complicated than you seem to realize. He was actually fighting a mob of interdimensional demons. I've tried to have open conversations about my politics, but mostly I've sheltered you from them. Another mistake. Well, those days are over now, and it's time to do the hard work of finding actual common ground if we want to have a relationship. Fuck you. Holy fuck. Fuck you. Fuck. It's time to have hard conversations about where you stand in this messy world and which side you're on. Another critical and hard-hitting piece by the Rolling Stone. As one commenter says, this piece is just apologetics for domestic terrorism. Disgusting. Rolling Stone is a joke. Rolling Stone are ordered to pay $1.6 million over the UVA something or other, their fake rape Jackie story that fucked over the lives of an entire fraternity. And these guys were under attack by an angry mob, which just goes to show you how dangerous these leftists are. They're attacking people who are completely innocent. I mean, they would have torn them fucking limb from limb if they had the chance. But $1.6 million, I think it's kind of bullshit. I don't think it's enough to cover the public damages which the New York Times has caused through these kind of stories. I guess that's up to the market to determine. But these are the kind of people going on about fake news constantly, right? And when they make fake news, they don't ever want to live up to it. And there's another article I read that's quite similar to this from another publication, and I'll be making another video about that in the next day or two. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe.
Volere la mia vita, no, non è finita, io mi fermerò, sciogli le mie vene, il cielo con il mare, io ti crederò.